Hello and welcome to a sunny book nook. And I'm wearing the same makeup as my most recent Patreon video, which is me talking about like my July reads so far and the authors I'm currently obsessed with and my reading habits and shit. If you are a patron, thank you so much. Just ignore that because I'm not redoing my makeup. Today I wanted to come back and film part 2 of my favorites of the year so far video because I recently posted my 2022 favorite books of the year so far part 1 video and my camera battery fucking died. So I still have more books to talk about. The first book on this list, not the first book on the whole list, but anyway, of one of my favorites of the year so far has got to be The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Muller. This book it's a crazy high fantasy that is so fucking top notch and I'm obsessed and I don't know why it doesn't have more hype, especially because the cover is so fucking beautiful. Like the back says, "Charm is a traitor, a witch, a whore, a prisoner, a survivor, and now she must also solve the Emperor's murder." And I think that's a pretty good like back situation synopsis to get you interested, but it's a high fantasy about this woman named Charm who is actually multiple women because inside Charm's body she has the lady and then Charm. Charm is a brothel owner and the lady is obviously like a noble lady, but they operate in the same physical body, they inhabit the same physical self, and they switch on and off based off of like who gets control of the body at any given point. And because of that, like they can withhold information from each other. It's not like if Charm knows something the lady does, and it's not like if the lady knows something Charm does. And the reason why it's called the Bone Orchard is because at the brothel, behind the brothel house, there is a orchard of like these bone constructions in which the lady makes these bone ghosts, because the bone ghosts are essentially the women who work at the brothel who are extensions of Charm herself. There is pain and desire and, oh my god, what are their names? Pride, shame, justice. These are all different like human forms. Some little girls, some older women, they all look different, and they are the prostitutes who work at the brothel house that Madame Charm owns. And because it's this kingdom that is sort of falling apart because the guy who's in charge is a bit of a tyrant. He dies and then his like son takes his place or something like that. But before the emperor dies, the emperor is like one of the brothel madam's like biggest customers and supporters, as are all the other noblemen who come visit her girls. She gets sent to the emperor and the emperor is like, "I was murdered. You need to figure out who murdered me." And basically there's a mind lock situation as well. There's so many different like fantasy elements in this that are so fascinating, and it's so dense and smart and interesting in a way that like I feel is so compelling. And I think that the way that the gender politics of this world is constructed and analyzed and broken down is so interesting, especially in regards to the idea of autonomy and bodily control and who has access to that and like how power operates. I haven't read the synopsis of this before because I kind of just went into this book basically blind, not really thinking anything of it, and just getting totally sucked into this fantasy world. Tucked away behind a notorious house of ill repute, there is a garden where the trees are grown from bones and nourished by the darkest of secrets. The clattering, ghostly harvest is tended on by the women who live and work at the orchard house. Charm, the madam, and her haunting beautiful charges, shame, justice, desire, and pain. Except on Tuesdays, when the emperor alone calls at Orchard House to see his personal concubine. Until the day he summons Charm into the palace to charge her with his dying decree. Choose which of his horrible sons will inherit the empire, by discovering which one has been responsible for his murder. If she completes this final task, she will be freed from a life of bondage and servitude. Torn between the dead emperor's will and the whispers of her own ghosts, Charm must choose justice for the emperor she hates or vengeance at the cost of her own freedom. Will she save an empire or save herself instead? So, yeah, I think like that sort of gives you a conceptual idea of what's going on, but on a nitty-gritty level, like there are these like soldiers, I'm forgetting the name of them, firekeepers? Fire drinker, yes. So fire drinkers are basically like soldiers who also have mind locks. And a mind lock is essentially some sort of magical programming that forces the person who is under its spell to comply to the person who is in control of the mind lock. And obviously for Charm, being the like sole mistress of the emperor who died, his mind lock on her will only be released if and when she discovers the murder of him. And there's a lot of like political intrigue, obviously, and the fire drinker question is also really interesting because they're basically like stormtroopers, like they're very anonymous, and they're at the behest of the leader of the group, and they all are very like anonymous, and they have to be for their work. And it's just so interesting. I think that the world building is fantastic. The characters and the relationships I'm obsessed with. I just feel like it's something that will stick with me as a good fantasy book that is going to be one of my favorites of the year, I hope. But yeah, I don't think I've read any other like high fantasy or fantasy novels this year that has touched anywhere near this book and its level of like brilliance and the fantasticness of its writing. I think there's this like trend where you go to page 99 and read like the fourth sentence or some shit like that, or like the first one. So let me see. "What color do you want your new dresses in?" asked Hyacinth. "I'll send some samples up in the morning with Lillian, and something pre-made that she can trim if I have anything that might be altered quickly." "White," Charm said. "I want morning crepe, but in bone white. Better just make one for day and one for evening." Hyacinth laughed her broad, coarse laugh. "Good for you." So basically Hyacinth is Charm's dressmaker, but obviously the Hyacinth has to work with both Charm and the lady who embodies the same body. And it's so interesting to see like the way that their adornments and outfits and accessories also shape and inform how and who they present as, I guess. And because it is a secret to the rest of the empire, and like all the ladies of the kingdom and most people in the kingdom, because she, owns a house of ill repute, like don't fuck with her like that. Don't fuck with her like that. They don't really like her, She's sleeping with all her husbands, or, her girls are. They also don't know that it's this, like, fantastical magic that allows her to create these, like, bone ghosts. So it's just fascinating, and I feel like I don't know whether everyone who picks it up will enjoy it, but if you are a fantasy reader and that sounds interesting to you, which I feel like it must be, because I think it's interesting, you should definitely pick it up. Then the next book I want to talk about as a favorite of the year so far is Yerba Buena by Nina Lacour. This book is fucking heartbreaking and shattering. It is a star-crossed lover type lesbian story featuring this girl who feels very meandering in her life, like she doesn't know what she's really doing. She wants to feel more connection with her displaced like Creole family and lineage who moved from like New Orleans to California. I think LA is where they're based in, right? Yes, in LA. Emily is the girl who's feeling kind of lost. She ends up working at a florist's and becoming really into flower arranging. And then that's one timeline that we follow, and that's actually the second timeline, because the first timeline is following this girl named Sarah who grew up in a more rural area of like Central California and in a town that is completely decimated by the opioid crisis. And her like first love, her teenage love of 14, Annie, died of an overdose, or like went missing, I guess. And Sarah's father is a dealer, presumably, or he's involved, and her mother also died of an overdose. And so she's like very traumatized, and she has a younger brother whom she chooses to abandon. Well, doesn't she, but like he chooses to stay back when she decides to run away from home and to go to LA, completely homeless, like no money to her name. She has to do a lot of awful things to get there. She ends up running into this gay boy who helps her. She has to face a lot of like sexual engendered violence, obviously, in trying to get to where she wants to go. But then years later, after, getting to LA, she becomes this really, really well-known and well-respected bartender. Basically, Emily and Sarah run into each other as bartender and florist when they both end up working at this restaurant called Yerba Buena. But Yerba Buena, the restaurant, it's this like swanky new place downtown, and it's owned by this really rich, famous chef, right, who's been featured in all the cooking magazines and shit. And he ends up getting involved with Emily, who's obviously much less powerful and much younger than him, and he's married and has kids. So there's like an affair going on, and Emily and Sarah don't really like meet until halfway through the book, because we're really exploring their pasts and their previous relationships and their current relationships and the shit that they've gone through to get where they are up until the halfway point where they meet and start their love affair. It is such a beautiful book that explores like trauma and grief really well in the way that Lena Lacour's books always do. And I was just sort of blown away by this, and I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I actually listened to this via the Libro FM influencer program, and the audiobook is phenomenal. But I just loved it so much that I needed to get a physical copy, because I also think that the cover is so pertinent and like beautiful to the book, because first of all, Yerba Buena is like some sort of herb native to some whatever area of California they're from, and Yerba Buena as a restaurant name is like really special to both of them for their own reasons. But Yerba Buena as a plant is special to particularly Sarah, because it was the herb that Sarah and her first girlfriend Annie, who died, like sort of bonded over and talked about, and those scenes are just absolutely shattering and heartbreaking. But it's such a beautiful lesbian love story that's full of light and joy, but still very deeply rooted in like the sorrow of traumatic and complicated family life stories. It's a lot to do with like, I think we explore a lot of Sarah and her relationship with her younger brother, whom she abandoned when she ran away from home, and her distant relationship to her hometown, and how she feels towards her family and her community about Annie's death. And then, of course, with Emily, her series of relationships and the way that she feels totally lost in life and how she finds her footing again. Emily gets involved with her English professor, who's a woman, and their relationship, we see their relationship throughout as well. I just love this so much, and I really think it's going to be one of my favorites of the year, but so far it definitely is. So those are the last two books on my list of like all-time favorites of the year so far. But I do have an honorary mention list that I will go through in a Patreon exclusive video, so please join my Patreon if you would like to view that, I guess. But, you know, till then, or otherwise, you can find me and friend me on Goodreads if you would like, or follow me on social media. It's always linked in the description. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and comment down below if you've read either of these books, because I really enjoyed them a lot. And are they both 2022 releases or 2021 releases? Let me see. These are both 2022 releases, and two of the books I talked about in my previous video, Siren Queen and then Just by Looking at Him, were also 2022 releases. So I would say those four books are my favorite 2022 releases so far. And, I have a bunch of 2022 releases on my TBR shelves and stacks, which I've discussed a little bit on this channel, but hopefully I'll get to more releases from this year, and you'll get to hear my thoughts on those. But those are my favorite 2022 releases so far, and some of my favorite books that I've read this year. And yeah, let me know what some of your favorite books that you've read this year that were published this year, or if they weren't, were down below in the comments as well, if you would like to. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video, hopefully. Bye.